Welcome to the Roundtable Perspective. I'm your host, Tom Roach. I'm joined today by my guest, Dr. Lee Artz. Dr. Artz is a professor of media studies and the director of the Center for Global Studies at Purdue University Northwest. And he's published 12 books and 50 book chapters and journal articles on media practices and social change. And he's here today to discuss his new book called Spectacle and Diversity. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Artz.
Happy to be here. I'm on the other side for a change.
Yeah, we'll see how that works. So let's get started here. What is transnational media, and how does that impact what we're seeing on television and in film and global culture in general?
Well, transnational media is defined, and the way I define it is it's two or more companies from two or more nations that share production costs, development of whatever the film or TV is, and then they plan to share in the profits. So
yeah.
the key thing is that there's two cultures, there's two nations, there's two companies that work together in partnership or a joint venture to produce a common media entertainment.
Okay, and that seems like a reasonable thing. Why are we interested in this?
Well, it's reasonable from the point of view of the companies. I mean, Disney
Yeah.
needs to have people in India that understand the culture, the language, the icons that can draw the appropriate things. And obviously somebody like Reliance Media in India appreciates Disney's expertise and the money and the distribution power they have. So both of those companies are benefiting from it. From the point of view of the people that work for it, probably not so much, because where the production is done is usually based upon wherever the wages are the lowest. So Disney and Reliance and others will find those locales where they can do things cheapest. For the audience, for us, the general public, it's interesting to see that the content that's produced by a transnational company is not largely different than the content that's produced by a Disney or Warner or Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
And that's what really started me on this research campaign, to see what the world is watching. What are the themes, what are the values, what are the practices that are presented to us as normal? And to me, that's really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak.
Yeah, and I guess this goes back, even before we were using this terminology. I remember when the spaghetti westerns were coming out in the 60s, they had these huge epic scenes of the Civil War with, hundreds, maybe thousands of people in the cast, because they were shooting them in Italy and they could afford to put that many people on camera, right? And so they kind of broke into the American market and made a fortune out of it with some low-cost movies that really
Well, one
up.
of the things that's interesting is many of the movies that we go to see, first of all, we see it in a theater, AMC movie theater, which belongs to Dali and Wanda, which is one of the biggest media companies in China. So all those good American citizens that go give their $12 to AMC theater don't realize that they're giving money to a Chinese company. Or they may be going to see DreamWorks, The Help, or Lincoln, or Green Book, or some other top film that's made by DreamWorks, and they don't realize that that's a company that belongs to Indian, the Reliance Media Company. So again, we're looking at what we think are American movies, and they're really made elsewhere. I mean, if you were to take a film like Liam Neeson's Taken, which has had several iterations of that, that was a French film by Europa, but it was made in English because that's where the market was. The thing is now, on a global scale, more media companies are looking to India, which has 1.2 billion people, or China, which has 1.4 billion people. That's a huge market. So to get there, they have to form these alliances. Sometimes they're mergers, but more often they're just joint ventures and co-productions over one or two films.
Well, and so the advantage of this, obviously, is that we're getting more technically advanced graphics and things because of the different companies, joining their forces and looking at one another's secrets and merging and things like that, right? But what's the downside?
Well, I think the downside is what meaning we take from it, because as in all media, there's a construction of meaning. And that's done through the choices of the characters that are on the screen, the dialogue, the lighting, the sound, all of that goes into creating a particular meaning. So if we looked at something like Disney, whose films I actually enjoy, we could look at a Disney movie and see that it has family values. But also the themes that are promoted in a Disney movie are always hierarchy, are always authority, are always a status quo, kind of laced with spectacle and coming of age. But that means that if you watch the 26 Marvel movies that have been made by Disney, you're going to see 26 times a crisis where the population is incapable of helping themselves.
Right.
They need a heroic figure who can do violence as well.
Right.
And the whole thing ends when the established order is put back in place.
Right.
That's true whether it's an animation or whether it's an action movie. And it's the interesting thing for me is it's true with these transnational media, whether it's from Brazil or Mexico or India and Malaysia or France and Switzerland, we get the same kind of themes repeated over and over. And that means we're getting these themes globally.
So what we were saying, though, is that there's this sort of homogenization of plots and ideas and characterizations and things, and so we're getting less diversity, right? In terms of what we're seeing.
The title of the book is Spectacle and Diversity because we're actually getting more diversity. And the reason is what better way to create consent for the message that you're giving than to include the cultural diversity there. So you could look at like the last Star Wars movie from Disney. It's like somebody had a checklist. Black character, check. Female lead, check. We're going to have somebody disabled, check. We're going to have an Asian, check.
I remember thinking that when Billy Jack came out. We got Native Americans. We've got karate.
To try to create this illusion that we're representing you, and that's one of the ways that we get amused, entertained, and enjoy those movies.
But I meant diversity in plot. Right?
No, the plots are pretty much going to be the same.
So how is that different from, say, genre, right? I mean, you can look through British literature and see that there's certain genre plots that reoccur, from Shakespeare through various periods in literary history. I mean, couldn't I defend Marvel by saying that this is just the genre that they're working with? They need a superhero to come in and save everybody, because this starts with what? With Superman and
Batman.
All that, right? Yeah.
There is interestingly enough, a graphic novel where Superman lands in Russia, and he defends the Russian Empire against U.S. Expansionism. No, the genre is capable of having many outcomes, of having many plot lines. Science fiction, for instance, you can think about 2,000 years from now. But why is there always a hierarchy? We have all this modern technology, but 2,000 years from now, you still can't have democracy. You get all of the Disney fantasies in the United States that got rid of the king, but all of the Disney fantasies still have nobles. From Frozen to The Lion King to Mulan, Disney defends hierarchy.
Now, why do you think they do that?
Well, because ideologically, they're defending their right to make a profit off of the American public. And they're defending their right to have deregulation of the media so they can expand their footprint across, whether it's ABC News or whether it's a music video.
So it's an argument for privilege, essentially.
I think so, but we don't. Obviously, when you go to the movie, let's go watch a movie about privilege. No, let's go watch a movie about how evil gets defeated by a strong hero. And we like that, right? I mean, who doesn't like to see Taken, where Liam Neeson takes down the drug lords, right? Or Law and Order, that's had like, I don't know how many thousands of episodes, where the cops, who are always dedicated to getting the culprits, do extremely illegal things, but we as an audience don't mind because we know they're guilty. So yes, it's rewarding to us as viewers. It's enjoyable.
Right.
But it also diverts us from the actual conditions of which we live under.
So it's entertainment. It's not political essays or anything. But on the other hand, you are saying though that there is a sort of political essay embedded in these things. Is this consciously embedded, do you think, or is this just the cumulative philosophy of people that are involved in a corporate entity like this?
I think because it's a cumulative outcome of the vetting that's been done for the script writers, the directors, and the actors, and their success with repeating.
Yeah.
Right? If I have one Marvel movie, it's a success, I'm going to make another one. So you're not going to vary from that a whole lot.
Yeah.
So partly it is the cultural cultivation of the proper way to make a movie, whether that's a romantic comedy or a drama or an action or an animated. And partly it is intent because you do these audience surveys that find out what they're interested in, what's exciting, what they will come to watch. But one thing that you will never allow, whether you're Disney or Warner or Dolly and Wanda, is you're not going to allow participation and public access to the production of media. I've done this in my classes.
Yeah.
I've shown movies, said, did you like that? And why do you like that? And they give me all these reasons. I say, well, what in your life happened that would be worthy of a story? And then I ask students to write the funniest thing, the most romantic thing, the most dangerous, and the stories that they give back are incredible, but they won't be made by Disney because they don't fit the formula that's been prepared for making action movies or animation movies or others.
But, so is it useful to compare this to theater? Because you don't have the kind of the corporate global oversight over what's going on there. I mean, do we see the kind of variety that you would expect from mass media, in theater? And is that an example of where this might have gone?
It's possible. You can see it in some children's books, smaller authors, smaller publishers.
Yeah.
You can actually see it in some smaller television and movie studios in different countries where they have made challenges, different scenarios with different possibilities, different outcomes.
Yeah.
But those are generally on the art cinema circuit, where the critics and everybody loves them, and they may make a few $1 million, but they don't ever come close to drawing mass audiences because that requires, on the part of the audience, a lot of thought, a lot of challenge.
And investment.
Investment in time and knowledge and tolerance even.
I suppose something that's kind of parallel might be the independent cinema, right?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying, the art cinema, independent cinema. Yeah, there will be others. John Sayles, who's the person that made the film on the Ukraine recently. Yes, and that's true in almost every country. There are independent cinema and independent studios. In fact, in Latin America, they have a whole system where nations will contribute to this fund, and then the fund is used to finance independent cinema. And many of those cinema will veer from what the dominant themes are, within certain limits, of course. The ability of humans to be creative and the ability of script writers or directors or actors to act out different possible scenarios is limited. I mean, is unlimited.
Yeah.
The thing that's limited is the structures that the genres now hold us to.
The channels that they...
Yes, this is what action adventure should look like. This is what a sci-fi, this is what fantasy should look like. And it doesn't have to be that way, and it never was that way if you go back to folk tales and smaller cinema and variety.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say folk tales. I mean, look at the bizarre variety of stories that come out of that tradition. So does this just impact us as consumers of entertainment, or does this impact us as citizens and, in broader ways?
Well, it's kind of veering back to what you were talking about with social media. Us not recognizing that it's dominated by the Googles and the Metas and the ByteDances puts us in a thing where we enjoy being on social media. We want to get the likes. We're going to participate in making the memes for TikTok.
Yeah.
But in that process, we don't realize that we are not actually much more than spectators. we're limited to the role, not of citizens, of participating in deciding what kind of world we want, but we're put in a role of spectators that enjoy this. Yes, we like country music, hip hop music, classical music, right? You have these multiple choices, but you're always in the position of being a spectator, which I would argue undermines citizenship and ultimately undermines democracy.
So if there were no mass-mediated entertainment like this, we might be involved in local theater and
I don't want to
poetry
overstate
readings and things like that.
I don't want to overstate the case, but many educators have made the argument that the rise of cell phones and iPads and computers has meant that when you drive down the street, you don't see kids playing outside anymore. You see the blue light inside because they're on their screen. But I don't want to overstate that, because I'm not against any of that technology or the mass media in general. What the problem is that the public doesn't have access to producing the stories that they have experienced. Instead, it's vetted by private companies. And there's really, you got Disney, Warner, Sony, Dolly and Wanda, Reliance, a few companies, Bertelsmann. There's a handful globally. And in the US, there's even less than that. There's like 4 TV channels, networks. There's maybe 5 or 6 film studios. And that, we're talking about a country of 330 million people, and we're going to let 6 people decide what we think is entertaining and what we need to know and what we can enjoy. It's just, I find it dehumanizing and undercuts our human creativity.
So how would we get closer to your ideal?
I think as anything that's happened in this country, it's always been the result of some social movement. And the larger society needs to recognize that and demand that public has access to the media, that there be set aside times or resources or channels or networks that are available to production.
And you've written about this in Venezuela, I think, right?
Yeah, I witnessed it in Venezuela. I saw Katia TV and I saw a dozen community radio stations. At Katia TV, it's a TV station in a neighborhood, but it broadcasts to 6 million people throughout Caracas. But anybody that lives in the neighborhood can be a producer. They come to monthly meetings. I want to have a film about the Little League championship we just won. Okay, everybody that thinks that's a good idea, and then they will vote on it. I want to do a film about the history of my family that came from
But there has to be a quality issue here, right?
They have a quality issue.
Would anybody rather watch that than watch Pulp Fiction or,
Well, the idea that we can't create quality, again, is a very elitist perspective. Like somehow only Michael Eisner can decide something that's quality.
Yeah.
That's just, it's just...
But it is profound when you think about what they achieved with some of these films.
Yes, but I also go back to Katia TV in Venezuela, and I've seen the films, and those films have been aired. And they don't, it's not like they just say, oh, go make a movie, here's your cell phone. No, they're given the latest video equipment. They are trained in doing the video. They have a script writer. They vet the script writing. They edit the script writing. And then they may make a telenovela, but it's going to be a telenovela that suggests it's not poor girl marries rich boy, but it's this community fighting to get a neighborhood food source that's affordable. That's a different kind of telenovela, and it's very exciting to witness. Again, my own class, my own experience has been, there's creative people sitting in that class. And if they don't get to go to advertising and take off to Las Vegas, most of them won't get a chance to exhibit how creative they can be, whether that's poetry or a graphic novel or a music
So you're saying that the average person might have a really good story to tell, and if you give them access to the kind of script writers and cinematography and things that that the films have, that they could maybe do things that are that interesting. A friend of mine works in Hollywood, and I asked him once, I said, how come a director will do an amazing movie and then you watch the director's next movie and it's very average? And he said, well, that's because the studio threw all of their best people into that first one because they thought it was a better investment. And so you did get better, character actors, and you've got, better everything, lighting, sound. And it accumulates to give you a kind of you are there kind of effect absorbs you more into the film, even though the story might be the same.
Yep.
Right?
And I would say the same thing
Yeah.
is true for most of the Marvel movies. I mean, kids that are raised on Twinkies and Cheerios develop a taste for Twinkies and Cheerios and are not likely to like eggplant parmesan or moussaka or some other cuisine because they haven't been exposed to it. I know my own brother brought his nephew over to my house and I was going to give him green beans, which is his favorite, but they were fresh green beans. He had never had a fresh green bean in 12 years. He only had that wet, soggy one out of the tin can.
Yeah.
And he didn't like it because he had not cultivated that taste. I mean, you know, as a wine connoisseur, you have to cultivate a certain appreciation, a certain taste for, and I would say
And
the
it's
same.
unfortunate when you do that because it gets very expensive, right?
Well, and I would say the same thing is, and one of the reasons we get cultivated this way is because it's very affordable to watch a video on demand or a television program
Yeah.
or even some rerun of a movie because it's there for us and we're used to it and we
Yeah.
expect it, and it does bring us an element of pleasure
Sure.
and enjoyment. And it doesn't vary very much from the rest of culture that we see on television and other movies and in the newspapers and even in political campaigns. It repeats the same. I mean,
And we gravitate towards things that we're familiar with and that don't challenge us, right? Yeah.
yeah, that's part of being human. But we also, I think, we should have space and we should cultivate that space for creativity and for contribution. Obviously, the major media companies don't want to do that. They're much happier with, we're the kings, we're the nobles, we know what we're doing, everybody bow down to us and give us your $12 for the next Marvel movie. So
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. So you know, just to kind of repeat this, you're saying that the role of these media moguls in our culture is similar to the roles of the nobles in the movies that they're making, right? Yeah.
And I would say so are the politicians. When you think about when Trump assassinated Soleimani, the Iranian diplomat that was in, where was he? I guess he was in Iraq.
Yeah.
He used the same tropes from a typical action-adventure movie. Here's an evil man. He's out to get us. We have to somehow intervene. I'm going to use these special missiles, and once he's assassinated, all will be right with the world again. It's amazing how much political narratives fit our entertainment
Well, didn't
narratives.
Reagan get caught, you know, reminiscing about some experience he had, and then people looked it up. Turned out it was an experience he had in a movie when he was playing a part. You know,
Well, just one thing.
yeah.
I just saw a special on Law and Order, a review of Law and Order, and one of the things that was noted is the number of police officers that have not had any training in sexual harassment or sexual crimes. In fact, when they did interviews, they found out that the police officers learned from watching Law and Order.
I'm sure they did.
And those are the people that are talking to women that have been harassed or raped or whatever, and that's their training, watching Law and Order.
Let's hope Law and Order got it right then. You know, we just have a couple of minutes left, but I just wanted to know what your take on the trajectory of cultural imperialism is right now. So I know 25 years ago, sort of the main topic in this area was that all of these cultural products were being produced in America, and we were dominating the
Right.
world's view of these things,
I-
and so we were exporting American culture into countries where it was disruptive,
Yep.
right? Has that sort of like transitioned into the discussion about global media, or are those still two parallel issues?
Well, there's still a discussion and a debate about it. Actually, the next book I'm working on dialogues, has this debate embedded in it.
Yeah.
Cultural imperialism, which I think was accurate for the 60s, 70s, 80s, suggested that because the United States could produce so many media products, and Coca-Cola and McDonald's and the rest, they could easily export that. And it was more affordable than Brazil making their own media products, because Disney would make them available at a very affordable cost. And that would have an effect on the cultivation of values and norms and expectations for that audience. What I have seen in my research over the last 5 or 6 years is that has been replaced by domestic media building their own media industries, using their own domestic advertisers, their own domestic product manufacturers, and creating familiar, culturally familiar media entertainment for their audiences. The interesting thing is they learned from the Disneys and the Hollywoods of how to do this, which also reinforces their own position in that society by using these same themes: self-interest, hierarchy, spectacle, and the rest. So it's not that the US went to South Africa and said, make a movie like this. South Africa has figured this out, and for that matter, Nigeria has figured this out, and India has figured this out, and Univision Televisa has figured this out. They've looked at how companies have been successful, and they've adopted their production practices, their thematic content, and the way they distribute. So in that sense, I say cultural imperialism is gone, because we can't say consumerism is an American value. It's a Chinese value. It's an Indian value.
Well, it is now because of cultural imperialism, maybe, right?
Well, you might say that's been the outcome, but to say that it's still being imposed or influenced or affected is no, because it's being homegrown.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for our program. Thank you to Dr. Lee Artz for joining me today on the Roundtable Perspective. I'm Tom Roach. I'll see you next time.